I welcome everybody from various other locations of the globe, Malaysia, Indonesia, Zurich, India. And if there's any other location that we're missing at the moment, I welcome all of you all to our webinar today, where we will be fundamentally talking about, is hiring, based on gut or data? And what are our experiences been so far in the industry where Melvin has been, in the talent management and talent acquisition and hiring, recruiting in HR space for a while now. He sees and understands how Malaysian markets work and on a day-to-day basis deals with such questions. And you also have me. I work for an HR tech company called peopleHum. So, we talk to clients across the globe to understand what are their HR needs like. So these experiences are going to be spoken about today. While we speak, I know that we can't pull you all in to converse with us, but probably if you all have any questions, anything that piques your curiosity, or if there's anything in specific that you'd want us to talk about, please make use of the box that is available there, chat box, and we'd be more than happy to pick it up as soon as we see it, or for sure by the end of the webinar where we do a quick Q&A. So with that, let's just start. Before we go ahead, Melvin, would you want to talk about yourself or MVC just in case, just to give them a heads up before we go ahead?
Yep. So just a very quick introduction of myself. My name is Melvin, and I'm the founder for the company, the consulting company for human resource, which is MVC Resources. In summary, I have about 7 years of experience dealing with human resource related matters, especially in talent management, predominantly in the area of learning and development and also talent acquisition. And of course, throughout the entirety of my careers, I've worked very closely with tech startups and also SME companies and even also MNC as well. We work very closely with the senior leaders when it comes to matters related to hiring or even hiring processes that needs to be optimized, and also some areas of advisory on certain key strategic matters as well pertaining to the business growth. So the reason I'm here today is, of course, we're going to talk about and discuss the topic centered around these areas, gut feeling or data. So I'll pass back to Sri to continue.
Yes, thank you so much, Melvin, for very quickly introducing you and MVC. So here's just a listicle on, the kind of things that we are going to cover in the webinar today. This is just for your run through so that, even what is going to be ahead of you today. We're going to talk about some gut feelings, of course, about, what our hiring decisions need on, what are your instincts when you're interviewing candidates or understanding and looking at their CVs or behaviors and things of that sort. We'll also talk about some trends that are, in the hike right now in Malaysia. What are people following? What is Malaysia going to take on when it comes to HR sector? And, what is it that they are looking at in terms of recruitment? We're also going to talk about data that can measure and quantify and probably help you get smart results into hiring or, better results into hiring. And how can we probably find a balance between two? And of course, our favorite, we'll do the Q&A as well. So that's a head start. I'm going to move in and very quickly, throw in some facts on Melvin to see how much of it does he personally agree to and of what has he seen in his industry or his 7 years of experience and talking to various companies. So Melvin, they say that, managers and recruiters have told us this is also based from the internet, but also from our experiences that 70%, 74% of them say that they probably have hired the wrong person for a job. What are your thoughts on that?
I think I would say that all of us in this room are part of the 74%. Reason is simple, right? I mean, humans are unpredictable. We thought like, hey, he or she is the one, everything is so good, we feel good. The bosses loves the guy, he's basically the person for the job. And then we came to a realization, second month, third month, he or she is not performing to what we are expected. So I totally agree on this part. We still make mistakes until today, right? It's just that what we are trying to do here is to minimize as much as possible by a thorough, careful decision making, and which is why again it centers back to the topic, gut feel and data driven kind of decision. Yeah.
Yeah, and also not to forget, like you said, we're humans. We tend to make mistakes, and I think that is making us keep on the fact that we are still humans. But we also see that I personally agree to this because I've seen this, in a lot of organizations that we speak to, and they say that 75% of employees are recruited when attrition decisions are made, or it's just like a costly affair for people to manage that part of it. So, what do you think about that?
Well, I have a case study on this particular second pointer here because I'm technically also helping a startup as well. There is one particular department, right, which has 100% attrition, right?
100%.
100% attrition, okay? Of course, let's not talk about the reason why. They'll come back to the juicy story later on. But my point here is that, of course, attrition literally makes the business bleeds, right? Productivity, profits and everything is affected the moment where people begins to leave, because you must understand, we are also pressured as a HR practitioners to really fill up the hot seat. But filling up the hot seat immediately is not the answer, right? We have to really diagnose what really went wrong. But again, yes, 75% of it, totally agree. It's super duper costly. And most of the time, these costs are not visible because it's translated into time, right?
Yeah.
But time is money at the end of the day. Yeah.
Absolutely. And like you said, time is money. That's the next thing that we're going to, talk about. They also say that on an average, approximately companies lose up to $15,000 for every bad hire that they make. And we're not even talking about, say, unproductive employees
Yeah.
or employees who are not setting up the right example or working towards their best efficient, behavior or work. It's just on the bad hires that they make. So definitely, like, money is important, revenue is important, and I feel this is where we are lacking.
Yeah.
So any other experiences that you'd like to share as a combination of the topics that we just discussed before we go ahead?
Yeah, so I mean the issue and the problem here is that these dollars and cents are not tangibly measured. You see, it's like, we don't lose it like minus or deduct from the bank account, right? Because it's not quantifiable in that manner. But if you think about it, the amount of time that you can save, right? You can prevent all these in the very beginning. You wouldn't waste your time searching for the same role, for the same to fill in the same job role, right? You want to work on something else more productive. You want to work on something more strategic, but not focusing back on things that keeps having failure and issues.
Absolutely.
So working very closely with the hiring managers and the bosses is definitely very important. Yeah.
Yes. So, like you suggested, we just thought about, there are some few general biases or recruitment pain points that we've seen.
Mm,
So, from a personal experience, I look at the partnership side of the
mm,
team in
mm,
peopleHum. So, we speak to not just practitioners, but also people who help other organizations from a day-to-day basis on their HR processes.
mm.
And most number of time, on an average, where fundamentally you go down is you have a general bias on the
Yep,
right sort of candidate or the right sort of employees that you're looking at. It can
yep.
be either based on your own personal experiences or the way you work. And
Mm,
also, I feel also judging candidates or based on, say, quantifiable or unquantifiable questions becomes difficult. Yes. And also, there's also the entire thing about quantity over quality, cost of hiring, how much do organizations are willing to spend on this entire process,
yep,
cost over cost. And
mm,
also, it is hiring entirely an HR job. So I'd
mm,
say that, whenever people get on calls with us, either
mm,
from a sales perspective or people when you're ready to become a partner, the first thing that they say is, we are looking for a HR solution because we want to make sure that in the organization, you're not just the ones doing this. Or, they are like, let me cut down on the administration work that I do for my organization. This specifically happens with startups, is what we believe, but we also see this happening in large size companies. And
yep,
of course, the entire business of backtracking the process,
yep,
probably finding the best candidate that you had and then seeing what were the traits that the person had so that we
yep.
can hire more people with that.
Yeah, totally agree. I think, I just want to touch a little bit more and add a little bit more of the pointers that you just mentioned here in this particular slides. I think the first one, general bias, is something unavoidable. we do have it in ourselves as well, right? Like it or not, whenever, there's always an impression whenever we get on the interview call with a candidate for the first time, right? Whether it's through their smiley expression or whether it's through their cheerfulness or poker face, whatever you called it, right? That instant millisecond already tells us, hey, I like this candidate or I don't like this candidate. What we want to avoid is having a bias that you don't like the right candidate, that is
Yeah.
dangerous, right? That is totally counterproductive, and it could really, really affect that you might lose that particular talent for your organization. You'll be like, I don't think this guy can make it, let's
Yeah.
move on, right? It happens quite frequently. So that's one. Second thing, judging the candidates on unquantifiable questions. Now, I know it's very common. We would ask questions or get the candidate to introduce themselves, right? They will
Yes.
share what they do in their previous experience, etc., etc. But then there are also many occasions whereby they don't drill into very detail. Rather than knowing what they do, or rather than knowing, what they have done previously in their day-to-day, it's also very important to really sort of throw in technical questions, right? Technical
Yes.
questions that's related to the job. Like, so for instance, so it's like, this subject matter A, coming here, do you know how to tie subject matter? I mean, do you know how to solve problem B and C, So the kind of scenario-based questions or even situational questions will actually throw them off guards, right?
Absolutely. Yes.
Sometimes they would tend to answer it from very neutral or trying to fake an answer in an upfront. But we can read that, we can gauge
Yeah.
that, right? Whether the person has the experience or not. Because at the end of the day, if you don't know what you don't know, you can't put a mask into someone that knows more than you, right? So that's important. Having quantifiable questions and quantity over quality. Now, this is something I would say, it's totally a challenge that we all face as well, because again, we get irrelevant applicants, right? We get irrelevant candidates trying to apply for a particular job. And of course, with the pandemic involved, right, we get more
Absolutely.
and more a candidate background from hospitality is trying to jump over, from the aviation industry is trying to jump over, etc., etc. So, and many times I've seen, how those juniors, HR practitioners, they just, sort of compile all of these profiles and just send it over to the hiring manager. Of course, that's not the right thing to do. The right thing to do is to really understand, what is required in the job, and most importantly, having a very thorough understanding of the business, right? Because we, as
Absolutely.
an HR, we have to work very closely as like a business partner instead of like an administrator, because that's not what we should do, right?
Yes.
So I always tell my clients, and I always tell my peers, less is more, right? What's the point of me sending 3 candidates versus 1 quality candidates? So what's the point of,
Yes.
giving you quantity, right? I'd rather go to the one single quality one. So that's that. Cost of hiring, again, I think we have covered in our previous slides,
Yes.
by, taking into account of the administrative expense, taking account of the time wasted. We spend maybe 3 months and above for certain difficult roles sometimes. And I
Yeah.
know, for instance, developers takes even longer.
Yes. And
And then,
also, if you're in the hunt to look for, say, anything which is mid seniority and
yeah,
above, it takes you more
yeah,
time because you need to
right,
plan which
correct.
ones to replace or fill into.
Correct. I know a lot of tech companies who is looking to hire programmers or developers. What they do is that they just flood all the hiring channels and portals throughout the entire year just to build the talent pipeline, which is the right thing to do. But I think, I guess that, depending on the roles that we are recruiting, we have to really position ourselves very attractively to these talents, because I think all of us also know that the developers' talent is a market talent. It's not an employer's market, right? They are the one who have the decision making, and they are the one who's very picky in the jobs. So we are always competing for the best,
Of
to
course.
get them over. So hiring is HR job. This point, no. Basically, hiring is a collaborative effort between the hiring manager or the business owner with the HR. HR job is basically facilitate advice or simplify, creating a rich candidate experience, making sure that you attract good people to apply through your particular job, and they felt like it's a great company to join, it's a great company to work with. So that's basically HR should be, right?
Yes.
Not just being pushed a responsibility of finding the right people. Finding the right people, again, like I mentioned, it's always a collaborative effort. We can always advise the hiring manager what we think of the particular candidate, but the ultimatum still comes back to them, right?
Yes.
Because at the
Because
end
they
of the
know
day,
what would be the right fit for the team.
exactly. But the thing is, we mustn't also put everything on their shoulders. We must also take maybe a bulk of the entire understanding of what they're looking for, and we have to also diligently screen on our end. And when the candidate goes through their level, I think it's just a matter of seeing organizational fit, already
Yes.
working chemistry, things like that. So I think that would really help to have a win-win situation of both ends, right? This
Yes.
is very important. Now, backtracking the process. Okay, this is something very commonly being practiced as well. Of course, we always look into best practices candidate or the best traits of candidates who we hired before in the past, and we're trying to sort of emulate and see, hey, can we find the same kind of characteristic?
Yes.
The answer is yes and no. I think yes, because it can serve as a guidance, as a reference, but no, as in like you can't really find an absolute mimic of those traits,
Of
like
course.
replication of those traits, right? So it still has to differ from person to person. And I think the most importantly is that, we must able to sort of evaluate, what are the top 3 or top 4 or top 5 key important things in this role. Because I think over time, as you see people come and go, you probably will find out what's wrong. Is it because of the job? Is it because of the hiring manager? Is it because of the complications of the role? So there could be many other
Factors
issues,
involved.
factors involved. Correct. So it's not necessarily always a candidate's problem. And I think, it's very important that you look into different perspective instead of accepting the blame, saying that, hey, the hiring manager said he's a bad candidate, I don't want a candidate. I
Yeah.
want him out, right?
And sometimes I also feel, bad candidates can also turn out as great because you might not like some cons in a person, but
Yeah.
eventually those cons can also be beneficial
Yep.
in specific roles. So it's absolutely open-ended at times, and you cannot
Exactly.
draw a skeleton around it saying these are the checkpoints that we'd want to check in for sure for the right candidates to come in. But no, Melvin, those were some very, relevant points. But next step would be how solutions can be created regarding these and can be processed from it. And I would want you to contribute here, Melvin, because I feel you've seen this up front when you're doing this for organizations or consulting various other organizations. So what are your perspectives on what probably solutions you think have been most effective, and probably where can we help?
Yep. I think the very immediate thing that we can do from our end, if we are short-handed when it comes to technology or processes, right, is to really just do a very quick diagnostic check in step 1. Number 1, always assess the role, right? Whether it's an existing or a new expansion role, right? Now, I've come to experience before a new expansion role, especially now. When it comes to a new expansion role, you must also take consideration that there's a lot of things, there's a lot of variables that is still trial and error,
Yes.
right? And there will also be possibility that we have to fine tune the roles along the way, right? So this is specifically where you need to pay very close attention to that role. And to make sure that whatever criteria or whatever specification that the hiring manager put into there does fit into whatever that the talent market has to offer, right? That's one. Secondly, the hiring frequency. Okay, is this a role whereby you hire on a month-to-month basis? Is it a very high volume based kind of role, or is it a role that is very unique and situational, that you only need to fill in this role in a particular timeline or a quarter, right? You have to also discuss that. Understanding the seniority again, whether it's a junior level, mid-level, assistant manager and above, okay? The complexity of the role, like I mentioned in the first part, and also looking into the past hires and candidates data, your existing data, to see whether do you have anyone that matches closely, right? Because if you do, this is where you can already take the opportunity to present forth, this particular candidate's profile to the hiring manager and sort of sit together and understand and analyze, is this what you want? Is this kind of profile that you're looking for, right?
Yes.
And obviously for at least the first and second batch of the entire, the screening part, you always need to go back and forth to fine tune, to optimize, because we need to find out whether whatever that we're looking for, does have the supply in the market, right? Because sometimes what we're looking for is a unicorn, and then the market,
and there's no surplus for it. There are jobs that has surplus supply of people who are interested in it, and there are some that just needs you to have that one person with jack off, most of the trades that you're looking at.
So exactly. So this step one has to be, I would say, repetitive in that sense, that you can't just do a one-off. It has to be a constant evaluation, right? Now, after you're done with the first step, is you look into the second step, which is once you already have a clear understanding of the job requirements and the role, this is where you need to draft technical or situational based questions, or even case studies along the interview process. And also involve collaborative or peer interviews. It's always advisable to have a collaborative peer interviews. Why? Again, eliminate bias. Very important, right? So we have to get someone from a different department who will be working closely with the relevant candidate or the particular job role, right? And then get their feedback and evaluation as well. They can put a score, out of 5 or 10, what would they think? What do you think that they're lacking? And if they feel they are on the fence, right, then you can decide the further steps, which is in step 3. Now, in step 3, basically, it's all about cross-checking. It's all about evaluating the data points collected from your questions, from your case studies, right? And also your peer scores, and to see, among these scores, whether is there any further gaps, right? Or you feel that something is lacking, right? Or maybe that 20 or 10% element is still not there yet. And this is where you can further decide on what are the kind of assessment tools you want to employ or deploy to make sure that it, gives you a clear understanding or insights of that particular candidate, right? Do not ever skip step 3 and just decide yes or no. It's very dangerous, right? We want to make sure, especially if it's a role that is super duper important, super crucial, you don't want to jump on the gun, just hiring the person like that, because the hiring cost is so costly, and you have to repeat the entire process again if the whole thing fails.
And you spend so much time in it.
Exactly. So there are a lot of times, that I've seen CEOs, bosses, and even a hiring manager are very impatient. They don't want to sit through any more interviews. They don't want to be involved in the process anymore. So they just say, okay, let's just make do with this and go, right? Now, if the implication of such decision is definitely, it really hurts the business, right? Because at the end of the day, not only the hiring manager has to take up the job, right? And then at the same time suffering that constant attrition in the department, is also challenging. So it's better to be, it's better to prevent than to cure, right? So always make sure you do not skip this particular step 3, right? Do not just rely on, verbal normal interview question as well, right? Because most of the time, I see a lot of hiring managers, they are just gauging based on what they have done before in the past. But it doesn't mean that whatever experience and skills they've done before in the past can fit very well in the current organization they're hiring,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
It could be differences in the factor of cultural difference. They don't like it here, or they don't like how things are done, or they don't like the processes. Okay, maybe it's totally different in their previous environment. So all these factors has also be taken into consideration first, right?
Yes.
So as a very common example, if let's say this is a startup company, is a startup role, would you hire someone from an MNC to come in? 50-50, you're not sure, right? You're not sure
Depends, yeah.
whether.
I'd say, yeah,
Yeah,
you need to do your evaluation in terms of
correct,
what kind of role would you want to bring that
correct,
person in.
correct, correct. But versus someone from a startup background to come into another startup, now at least half the battle is done. Why? Because again, the cultural side of things, the constant change of direction, the adaptability factor is there.
Yes.
The remaining portion of it is just to make sure that we are able to address the technical ability of the person and also the propensity of the person to grow within the organization, right? Because startup is all about retaining talents, right? They can't
Yes.
afford to keep hiring, firing and hiring, right? You're
Yes.
always looking for ways and measures to retain talented people, or a talent that is coachable and trainable to the level where they can grow the business together into a unicorn. I don't know, yeah.
Yes.
That's what most startups
I
are.
think that's the ideal way of looking about it when it comes to probably hiring and
Yeah,
training.
yeah. I just had a chat with one of a regional startup recently. They just managed to raise a funding. They're in a food tech startup, and and they always tell me. I mean, when I had a conversation with the HR personnel, she's also based from India, and she said, "Melvin, I need this person urgently by yesterday. Everything I need by yesterday. Okay, I don't want by tomorrow or the day after. I want by yesterday." So, so because they are so, because startup is all about speed, right?
Yes.
The timeliness for you to penetrate a certain market, the timeliness for you to grow customer acquisition. So I can understand, the urgency or
Yes.
how they want to shortcut the hiring process. But again, you mustn't disrespect, certain things, the hiring process you shouldn't avoid, right? Even though the person may come from the right background of company, the right role before this, they might end up screwed up as well, if
Yes.
you hire them. Touch wood, of course. Of course, we are hopeful that they do not end up that way. But
Of course.
I've seen many people from startup team jumping here and there, and then they're not staying for a very long time. And some, depending on the motivation of the candidates, right? Some candidates, they just want to quickly spring up very quickly into a senior manager role at a very young age, or another reason is to jump in very quickly to spike up their salary, and especially developers, very relatable, they jump so much, they already reach a ceiling, and then no company is able to afford them, or nobody wants to pay them for more, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so
So that's also in case, like, people who've joined us, in case some of you all are not from the hiring space, but from a space where probably you would be a potential hire. That's also a good thing to look at.
yeah,
How are you moving and transitioning in your careers, and how would you want the next steps to look like? But for the hiring part of it, Melvin has beautifully covered the top three important things that he feels is like a solution-based flow. Step one would be to access and understand what is your frequency and your candidate data sheet like. Step two would be to fundamentally take you through the drafting and technical prospects of it, asking the right kind of questions, involving more diverse crowds to interview them and score them. And step three is to always cross verify and double check on the gaps and assessment processes. And if your understanding is this the best hire for you or not. So those are few of the things, but I also feel, Melvin, as you're speaking about it, it's a great segue to understand where does tech come in all these factors, and
yep,
how could we potentially look at a mix of it.
yep,
So
yep,
most organizations who also have a wonderful process in place, slowly when they start growing, it becomes difficult to keep
right,
track of all these data
right,
points.
right.
And I will feel that it's a good segue to talk a little bit about peopleHum, or probably more than peopleHum, just how an HR tech company or HR tech solutions can help you in this direction.
Mhm.
So here's few of the things that can be done when an HR tech product or a solution is involved. Fundamentally, you are not looking at general philosophies anymore. You are letting the data do the talking. You
Yep.
will know your percentage of hires. I'll be showing you a very little gist about what it actually looks like on the system. But
Yep.
fundamentally, you will let data, quantifiable solutions, and quantifiable answers give you what is your quantifiable data going to be the next step, and how can you plan it out. You will be able to look at managing your entire funnel together, understanding what processes are your candidates being a part of, and at what stage can you look at or evaluate in a better fashion. And once they are hired, of course, to look at how can success them in a bit better fashion into the organization and probably out of the organization. And it's we are living in an on the go world, so probably do all of this on your desktops, on your laptops, on your mobile phones, iPads, or anything that's convenient to you. So wouldn't want to indulge so much, but would just want to give you all a rough understanding of how this would look on a system. So this is peopleHum, of course, and the capabilities of it. But just to tell you, hiring would be categorized into understanding data. What kind of jobs are you looking at? What are the applications that are coming to you? How can you screen them right? Do the evaluation right? And also, probably or do offer letter management and negotiate with them. And probably also understand a best funnel would be that who are the people who are already working in your organization, and how can they bring in better candidates into the organization. And in terms of just running data, letting the data talk, and your results talk and analytics talk about your funnel. This is a very basic funnel on the recruitment that has happened on the equations that we put in. And you will also be able to see which funnels are giving you the best results, and are they doing justice according to what you were hiring for. It can be agency driven or any referral systems driven, but it will tell you what are your numbers like. So at
Mm.
the top of it, you will know what is the amount of time that you're spending on each funnel, and what is the result that you're getting out of it. In
Mm.
terms of rejects, drop offs, or probably even the percentage of hires that is happening. And say a beautiful feature here is to understand what amount of time you're spending in it, so that next time you're or hiring on a specific job, you will know that, okay, these are the number of days that I have to spend, so let's just backtrack and start, say, 90 days in advance, like for
Yep.
example.
Yep.
So these are some of the things that you can look at. You can obviously understand, understanding which were your best candidates would be also a process. Like which institutes should they go to, or which previous jobs did they apply for. If you want technical advantages on, your client, your hires that were the best, you will also get technical, information about that. But fundamentally, managing your employees also, candidates also becomes an important category. So in the application funnel, when you're putting out the job, understanding where are these applicants coming from and what is the probability of those people getting into the organization would be the next step. So you can take them through various processes, like the new stage where they've just applied, screening them, evaluating them, offering them a job. Have they accepted it and being hired into the organization? Drop offs, or just save them for later. And also understand at what level, where are they coming from, and what would be a probable percentage of getting hired them. So these are some of the key attributes that we look at when it comes to the hiring funnel. There's of course, understanding how many applications do you have to talk to in a day. You needn't worry about that also, because your work calendar already has, say, a gazillion invitations for your entire day now, specifically like than ever, because we work in a hybrid fashion. So it also gives you a rough analytics of what are your calls that are scheduled, and in case there are any end moment changes that you'd want to make into it. So that's a peek into some of the features that an HR tech solution would provide, and specifically at peopleHum that we provide. And it's very hassle free and easy to use. And in terms of taking them to another level and making them the best candidates in your organization, you can also automate and auto trigger some of the onboarding and offboarding features, so that every time you hire somebody, you don't have to go to someone and say, okay, you are responsible for this, please get done this, or please get done that. And likewise for your offboarding as well. But that's a quick run through about peopleHum system and what is it that we do in the organization. Melvin, what are your thoughts about some of the things that you've seen in the market out there, or your examples, or if you've seen an organization grow using a combination of both?
Well, I think especially for tech startup organization, having a proper HCM system would actually help them to scale the business much easier. You can imagine, I have one particular client that I'm working with. In 1 year, he wants to quadruple the growth size of the team. Quadruple. Huh?
Quadruple is the word.
Yeah, quadruple. Now, quadruple is not times 2 or times 1.5, it's times 4. So can you imagine doing everything manually? It's haywire. Okay. It's not efficient, right? You lose certain candidates in the process. You forgot about some of the follow-ups. There's no notifications. Everything is done manually. It's hell, right? And the worst thing you want to happen to you is that one of the good candidates, you forgot about them because you have interviewed so many. Yeah. So that's one. And I think on the data analytics part is also very important to plan the recruitment efforts, right? And also just now you show the channel effectiveness. This is also another very important factor because we do not want to focus on channels for specific roles that doesn't yield the kind of results that we want. We just want to zero in the effort for the most appropriate channels. And at the same time, you also want to see the entire organizational trends when it comes to hiring specific roles and functions, because as you know, recruitment is also seasonal, right?
Yes.
They appear on a certain month, on a certain year, right? Yes. And this is where you need to plan carefully, not to just put all egg in one basket, but to be able to strategically plan your sourcing effort. If let's say you are having an internal TA, or whether or not, you are preparing your expansion plan for the next 3 business years. So these are all efforts that needs to be planned in advance with the help of data. Right? Without data, you can't extrapolate, you can't predict, you don't know the trends, right? You basically do things in the dark, right? So this is what, as a strategic HR practitioner, you need to avoid all these firefighting every day, filling up roles, you have to plan very carefully your resources, not to go over budget, right? Because as you know, again, as a HR practitioners, we have always been treated as a cost center. And it's always difficult for us to get extra budget here and there.
Yes. And this helps you plan better. I feel like the first step would be to look at it from a way where you will feel that you're planning better and there's less paperwork to scroll through. You don't have to go through your Excel sheets or, your Google Forms or the paper filling that happens when you take in candidates' information and so on. Imagine just skimming and scanning through it all the time, trying to find one right candidate that you were like, I remember Melvin. I absolutely remember, I spoke to that guy. He was wearing a pink shirt, was absolutely good with his dialect, but I can't remember his name right now.
Yeah.
So, it's just impossible to remember a lot of things and process all these things when you start growing, and that cannot be the job of one person. So here it also gives you a creative way where other people can also can join in the conversation. They can give their feedback and slowly say, okay, this is what we feel, and step away for HRs to also finish out the entire cycle. So these are a few of the things that we wanted to talk to everyone and, discuss a little bit about our information on how, when it comes to HR, when it comes to hiring, when it comes to recruitment and talent procurement, there has to be a combination of both. Biases are never going to go away because we're humans and we like things certain way. And it's fundamentally based on the things that we liked or disliked about people or situations, but also probably a combination of what is it that you think is right versus have some amount of data to associate with it would give you the potential right results.
Correct.
So, Melvin, before we quickly move to the Q&A, and start looking at the questions that have come in, it will also be wonderful to understand what do you see as a key trend happening in Malaysia right now with the pandemic situation? What do you think people are looking out for, both in terms of hiring as well as in terms of people who are applying for the job?
I've seen a trend in the Malaysian hiring whereby there's a lot of role that's required you to be hybrid. Gone were the days whereby, specialization of roles. Gone were the days whereby you only do one thing at a time. And I've been seeing, roles interchangeably like never before. It's evolved, right? It's been a hybrid model whereby you're required to have more than one scope in your area of job. And that actually, is challenging for those job seekers out there, because again, they've come from the traditional environment of being able to just do one thing, right? And then out of a suddenly, because of the pandemic, because of company constraints of resources, they are required to gear up themselves and to be able to do more or having to offer more, right?
Yes.
So these trends are quite prevalent. I see, especially in organizations who is looking to hire maybe the commercial and the operations side of people, including back end operation as well. You can see HR and finance works interchangeably. And even in MNC organization, the resources are getting smaller. Everything is shifting to shared services. No longer with the time where every entity are given the HR sort of resources, right? Everything is streamlined very greatly.
Yes.
So that's the major trend. But of course, on the good side, on the hindsight, the job market is coming back alive. There's more and more vacancies out there. More companies are already sort of became numb to the pandemic. It's a business as usual. So
Because we all need to be returned back
yeah,
to work, right? I
correct,
feel like
correct.
it's not about physically getting back to work,
Yeah.
but the entire thought of, oh, you have to work by the end of the day, right?
Correct. So I have clients who have, already prepared for the worst, and they just don't care. They just go ahead with their business plan, just very
Yeah.
aggressively, and they're even looking of outside Malaysia, targeting of acquiring different target markets. So of course, I would say these are the key trends that is appearing, but of course, the hiring process also becomes even more stringent, right? Because
Yes.
of the over what I called it, the over supply of talent in the market
Yes.
as compared to before. And there's also a lot of trends I'm seeing that Malaysian companies are outsourcing their sort of operation to other countries as well. Countries like India, Vietnam, a developing country who has more and more skilled labor over there as well, especially for tech. And yeah, but overall, I would say, with all these changes happening currently in this current situation, it is very important that the hiring manager or the hiring company do not settle for something. Don't go for the easy way out. That's what I'm trying to say, right? Always be cautious, always be careful in a sense that relook into your hiring process, tighten it up, make sure there's no loose ends. If there's any leakages or any issues of hiring in the past, try your best to relook into the entire thing and just find out whether is there a problem with the hiring process or even the job itself, right?
Absolutely. I think that's very necessary. And also, Melvin, as we enter the last 5 minutes of the webinar, I asked, some of our attendees on a poll that, are you relying on gut instincts to make your hiring decision? And you're going to be marveled at the fact that the percentage is 50-50. Like 50% of people who are attending the webinar right now said yes, they are relying on gut instincts, and 50% said no. So I feel like that says a lot. But yeah, what would you say? What are you doing right now? Very quickly, like a yes or no answer, you and I can both say, and then we can also look at few of the questions that have come in, because we are towards the last couple of minutes of the webinar.
Right. Okay, I just submitted my answers as well in the poll.
Yes, so now it's reached 60-40. I think you just changed the bar there. So yeah, so some of the questions that we've received right now is that somebody has asked, hi, if we were to switch to an objective and evidence-based method of hiring, how long would it be taken? How long would it take for us to implement such an approach? Well, I would say from a technical standpoint, it completely depends on how willing are you to fasten on that process, and how willing are you to dedicate your time and energy and your team to put in that effort. But it's absolutely dependent from an organization to other organization on how much time you're ready to spend. Totally based on that. Anything that you'd want to say, Melvin, or I could move on to the next question?
I think I echo the same with you. I think
Okay.
it's really dependent on what you just mentioned, correct?
Yes. The next question is, you say that recruiters should trust data more than gut feeling, but it is impossible. Is it possible to make every part of the hiring process objective?
Do you want to take on this or I take on this?
No, Melvin, you go ahead. I completely give you.
Okay, so maybe I backtrack a little bit. I think it's a 50-50 combination. I wouldn't say that you should trust data more than gut feelings, obviously. I would say it's a 50-50 altogether because and to answer the second part, yes, it's possible to make every part of the hiring process objective if you can put certain assessment or measures in place, or the first screening level is possible as well. I know that it can be counterproductive if you put too much, right? It will turn off certain candidates, especially, if it's the right candidates or talented candidates, right? It may be too much for them and they will feel turned off. So the best way to look into this is to have a balance, instead of having separate sessions to incorporate, any assessments, try to lump together in one session itself. Let's say, for example, your first screening interview, it wouldn't take more than half an hour, right? Or maybe at most 45 minutes. Maybe the first 20 minutes is for a chat, and then the next 25 minutes is you can do something more objective driven. It could be a question-based approach. And based from that level itself, it should already give you an indicator whether this person has more than 50% for the job or not before you shortlist for the second round, as opposed to having two separate sessions and you're wasting your time, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, you can basically find the most simple way. But like I said, you can always design questions, right? Technical based questions.
Yes. So we'll take one last question, and I think other questions will be answered by our team there. One last question here, which I think is interesting to take, Melvin, and me and you can both have our takes on this. Is investing in a solution for data-driven hiring a viable solution for small companies and startups? So if you don't mind, I'd like to go first, and I'm also going to consider that we only have a couple of minutes left. Is that, what we've seen across, customers who come to us or who bought peopleHum as a solution. And of course, I think that's going to be the same use case for other people who bought other solutions as well. Is that most HRs say, or HR practitioners say that, organizations don't see it as a need until it becomes a dire need, like a must have. So by that time, you're any which way is exhausting a lot of funds. If you would have rather pre-planned and started in the beginning and then slowly transitioned with it, it becomes more cheaper for you because you're spending less time over energy. So I feel that's how it becomes a viable and say an investment standpoint to invest in a HR tech solution where it can help you with all those things. But of course, Melvin, I'd also, want to know how you feel about it.
I think I'm going to answer from a business owner standpoint of view, right? I think startups, small companies, always the first 3 years is all about survivability, right? And I think we don't want to invest into something prematurely until, there is a very definite or strong what you call it, base or foundation, which is you have a proven business model, it's working, and you're in a phase right now, you are scaling up. Now, this is where having a data-driven kind of solution is very important because you're scaling up, right? And you know that by hook or by crook, with or without the technology, you will still scale up anyway. So why not use technology to make your life easier, right? So do not invest prematurely, obviously. We must look into other areas of concern or other areas of importance as well in the business, like the cash flow, the survivability of the company, before you come to the level of looking into scaling up the business. And of course, scaling up means you are removing all the manual processes away, you are automating a lot of things, you are saving a lot of time, you are leveraging on technology, right? So that would definitely be the right thing to do.
Yes. So for everybody who joined, this is what me and Melvin had to talk about today. And we just want to present you with ideas and solutions that we have around these topics. In the beginning of the webinar, I had shared some email IDs with you. One is Melvin's and one is mine. In case at any given point of time, you'd want to reach out to us, we will send across all the information you want. And any other conversations or chat you'd want to have, we'd be more than happy to do it. As we end this webinar, thank you everyone for joining. And for people who weren't able to join, we'll be soon sharing this on our social media and other platforms. Thank you so much, everyone. Bye-bye. Have a nice evening ahead.